In 1974, I was the rabbinic administrator of the Kashrus division of the Union of Orthodox Congregations of the United States. And as such, I did a great deal of traveling. 1974, as many of you will remember, was the year of the Arab oil boycott. After the Yom Kippur War, the Arab states stopped shipping oil for a period of months to the Western world and especially to the United States. Now, in the United States, you can do almost anything, but you cannot take away the automobile. And there was an outburst of what we were not accustomed to, of overt anti-Semitism because of the fact that people didn't have gasoline, didn't have petrol for their cars. I was flying on a plane, and I was sitting next to a businesswoman, and suddenly she turned to me and she said, "You know, of course, this is all your fault." And I said, "Madam, it's because of me, but it's not my fault." The story of the Jewish people throughout its ages is one of the fact that it's not necessarily our fault, but that a lot of things happen because of us. And in the little tour that I want to give you of anti-Semitism throughout Jewish history, you will, I hope, understand what I mean when I say it's because of us, but it's not our fault. In the ancient world, in the classical world, when paganism ruled, Greece, Rome, etc., so the anti-Semitism then was national, not religious. Paganism's a wonderful thing. You got 100 gods, you can have 101. And basically both the Greeks and the Romans were tolerant of other faiths because as long as it did not concern their national interests, they didn't really care. When, however, they encountered the Jews, and especially encountered them in the land of Israel, Judaism is not just a faith, it's a family, it's a way of life, but it's also a national entity. And the national entity of the Jewish people was at odds with the Greeks and with the Romans. And in fact, the most bitter wars that the Roman legions ever encountered were the wars in Judea against the Jews. But that was a matter of nationalism. The Romans came quickly to the idea that if you destroyed the Jewish religion, you would destroy Jewish nationalism. What Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon would say later in the 10th century, that our people are a people only because of our faith and our Torah, the Romans understood that very well. And therefore, in order to destroy Jewish nationalism, they set out to destroy the Jewish faith. After about 100 years, they realized that somehow they weren't going to be successful. And a truce then existed between the Jewish people and between the Romans. Now the Jews scattered after the destruction of the temple. You have a large Jewish community that exists in Rome itself. The Colosseum, for instance, was built by 70,000 Jewish slaves that the Emperor Hadrian brought after the destruction of Bar Kokhba. And the Jews lived in Alexandria in Egypt. There was a very large Jewish community. And there was such a large Jewish community in Alexandria that not only did they have the largest synagogue in the world, it was a synagogue that was so large that no one could hear the Chazan. So they raised flags to tell you when to say Amen. A system that I think can be employed in some of our synagogues as well. But they built a temple, an exact replica of the temple in Jerusalem. And they said, this is our temple. And they offered the temple service. It was called Migdash Chonio, the temple of Chonio, who was a candidate to be the high priest, and when he wasn't the high priest, as often happens in Jewish life, he took his talit and made his own synagogue, so here he made his own temple. But it was a very wealthy, sophisticated, powerful Jewish group that lived in Alexandria. So you have Jews in Rome, Jews in Alexandria, Jews in the land of Israel, and Jews in Babylonia. All of this changed with the coming of Christianity. Now, Judaism is the only one of the monotheistic religions which is not an exclusive religion. There used to be a sign in the New York subways that said, you don't have to be Jewish to enjoy Levy's rye bread. Which is a profound theological statement. But it was lost on the masses. You don't have to be Jewish to have an immortal soul. You don't have to be Jewish to come to the world to come. We're not exclusive. We're exclusive as far as Jews are concerned. But as far as the rest of the world is concerned, people who are moral, who observe the Noahite laws, so they are not excluded from anything. Not so with Christianity. In its original form, and in the form that it exists even today, in Roman Catholic belief and in most of the Protestant beliefs, and the only way you can come to the Father is through the Son. So you can be the nicest guy in the world, but if you don't believe in Jesus, if you don't believe in the divinity of that person, then you're doomed. And there was a second basic difference between Christianity and Judaism, and that Christianity held that a person is born in sin, meaning that the moment a person is born, the person is doomed, and that he needs to be saved. He or she needs to be saved. Mostly the he's need to be saved. And if you don't believe in Christianity, you're not going to be saved. Judaism believes that a person is born with a share in the world to come, and so to speak, you have to lose it. But if you don't lose it, then that share that you were born with remains. So there were basic theological differences. Now, Christianity swept the world. It took over the Roman Empire. In the 4th century, already Constantine converted the entire Roman Empire into Christianity. The Jews said, no, we don't believe. And it was especially troubling to the church because of the fact that Christianity was born out of Judaism and Jesus was a Jew. And it was very troubling that his own people should somehow reject it. They should say it never happened. And because of that, the church embarked on a millennia-long campaign to convert the Jews to Christianity. In fact, among certain sects of the Christian world, the eventual redemption cannot occur until the Jews somehow get the message. And that's why, for instance, in the United States and in Israel also, enormous amounts of money and effort is expended in trying to convert Jews. As though that's the problem in the world, right? But theologically, it is the problem. So the early church fathers wrote terrible things about the Jews. Every statement that Julius Streicher wrote in Der Stürmer in the 1930s and 40s can be found in the writings of the early church fathers. And because of that, therefore, anti-Semitism, which is a phrase that only came into use in the 19th century, became not only acceptable, it became the norm in the Christian world. It became part of Christian theology, part of belief. The Jewish community in Alexandria fought pitched battles, open civil war against the new Christians in Alexandria. And many bitter things happened between the Christians and the Jews in the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries. And that left bad memories on both sides. And you remember if if there was a civil war, if they bribed the authorities, etc., all the nice things that go on when people disagree. And because of all of this, anti-Semitism was endemic in the Christian world. It's part of it. It went through waves. But in the 5th and 6th and 7th century, the Byzantine Christians, the Eastern Orthodox Christians, those who didn't accept Rome, controlled the land of Israel and controlled the Middle East. And they set out, they said, we can't convert the Jews, we're going to exterminate the Jews. That's the solution. The Jewish problem is always a problem, and we're going to solve it. We're going to exterminate the Jews. And therefore the Jewish population in the land of Israel diminished so that there were barely a few hundred Jews left in the entire land of Israel. They were unable to get to the Jews in Babylonia because Babylonia, for some reason, did not become Christian, remained pagan. But Alexandria, the Jewish community, was destroyed. Throughout the Middle East and throughout the Jewish world, the Jews were in bad shape. So a strange thing happened. The safest place for a Jew was to be next door to the Vatican. And it's an irony that throughout the Middle Ages, the safest place, the Jewish neighborhoods, were always next to the cathedral. Because part of the doctrine of the church was that somehow we need to have Jews available at the end of time when Jesus will come back the second time. Well, how will we know he's Jesus? He speaks Hebrew. I mean, Jesus didn't know Latin. So we need Jews. And these Jews became what was known as the Pope's Jews. The Pope protected them. And there always were a few hundred and later a few thousand Jews that were under the Pope's protection. So when all of the terrible things that happened, the Inquisition, the pogroms, It never happened to the Jews who lived next door to the Vatican. And basically, in the Christian world, the Jews that lived next door to the cathedral also were protected because of the fact that somehow the church felt that they were going to need those Jews. Now, when Hitler came and the Germans took over Italy, when Italy tried to surrender, when it did surrender in 1943 to the Allies, so then the German army took over all of Italy, and you had this long, terrible Italian campaign slogging their way through Italy. The Pope, Pius XII, never made a statement about what was happening to the Jews of Europe. It's one of the objections that Jews have to the attempted sainthood of Pius, though I really feel it's none of our business. We'd be far better not saying anything. In any event, the only statement that he ever made is when the Germans rounded up the Pope's Jews. They took away 300 Jews from the Vatican, and then he made a statement, then he made a complaint, because he needed those Jews. They were part of him, part of his theology. As long as I mentioned the Italian campaign, I had a very good friend of mine, Rabbi Paperman, who was a chaplain in the United States Army, the Fifth Army that fought in Italy. He was the chief Jewish chaplain. And so he told me once that in 1943, he had arranged a Seder for Pesach night for 5,000 Jewish troops that was going to be held in the Grand Railroad Station in Rome. But he didn't have matzahs. And he had ordered matzahs from America, from the Jewish Welfare Board, but because the American shipping then had priorities, so they were sending over tanks and guns and infantry, the matzahs were somehow on the bottom of the list. So now it's 2 months before Pesach, and he doesn't have matzahs. So he went to see the commander of the American Army, General Mark Clark, and explained the situation to him, that he's got this great Seder and Pesach is coming, and he's got to have matzahs. And he asked Clark if he could expedite the shipment of the matzahs. Clark said, better still, he said, we've got the American quartermaster general there, who was an Italian American. Here, he called him in, and he said, Captain Paperman explained the problem to him, and Paperman tells him the problem. So the Italian says, no problem, I'll bake you off all the matzahs you want. 5,000 troops, there's 3 tons of matzah, nothing. Paperman doesn't know what to say. 2 weeks before Pesach, the American matzahs arrive. And with great relief, he has them all lined up at the Seder. All the top brass is there, the generals, etc. Mark Clark is there, the quartermaster general is there. And it comes to the Seder, and they pass out the matzahs. So the quartermaster general breaks off a piece of the matzah, and he eats it. He turns to Paperman and he said, mine are better. The Jews in the Middle East would have been completely eliminated had it not been for the rise of Islam. Now, Islam is the other exclusive religion. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. And if you don't believe that Muhammad is his prophet, then Allah is not going to let you in the door. And Islam is aggressive. Its idea, like Christianity, is that it's a universal religion. It has to convert the whole world. It sweeps through the Middle East. It comes almost to the gates of Vienna in Europe. It's defeated finally by Charles Martel. But Islam now controls a large part of the Jewish world. And here also we have the same religious problem. What do we do with the Jews? Because the Jews said, Muhammad, no. There's no new revelation. There's no cancellation of the old revelation. There are no new prophets. We don't believe. So if you look in the Quran, there are two contradictory views regarding the Jews. One is very complimentary. Jews are wonderful. They're the people of the book. That's where we got the name. That name comes from Islam. It doesn't come from us. Most Jews today don't know what book they're talking about. But we're the people of the book. We have to be treated wonderfully. And then there's a second contradictory stream that says the Jews are terrible. They're vipers, they're cheaters, they're murderers, they're just the worst things in the world. Infidels, they have to be eliminated. Why are there these two contradictory streams? One was written when Muhammad still felt that he could get the Jews to convert, because he said to the Jews, you object to Christianity, you object to the Trinity, you object to the idea that God comes in a corporeal form. We don't have any of that. And we don't have any idols in our mosques. It's completely cleansed of any statues or forms. It's easy to become a Muslim. So he thought for certain that the Jews would buy in. When the Jews refused, so then you have the second stream. But Islam made an accommodation for various reasons because they needed the Jews. For instance, in Spain, in the golden age of Spain, the Jews were generals in the Spanish army. The Spanish army was Muslim. Jews were the diplomats. Jews were the bankers. So therefore, they created a situation called dhimmis. Dhimmi meant that you were a second-class citizen. You're allowed to live there. We're not going to kill you, but you have to keep your place. You can't walk on the same sidewalk as a Muslim. You have to wear identifiable badges or shoes to say that you're a Jew. You can't build a synagogue taller than a mosque. You have all of these limitations. But if you live by the limitations, you'll live. Which, relative to what happened to the Jews in the Christian countries, was very tolerant. And Jews rose to great prominence in the Muslim world. And the entire culture and background and Weltanschauung of the Jews who lived with Islam was different than those who lived in Christian countries. So now that we're back in the state of Israel together, and we're reunited after 1,500 years, so it's obvious that there's going to be some sort of difficulty in integrating people who come from completely different worlds. One of the great miracles of the state of Israel is somehow it works. That's the greatest miracle. I remember that once after the Ethiopian immigration, I was in Israel and I had breakfast in Rabbi Lynchner's boys' town in Jerusalem. And he had a separate department for the Ethiopian young men who had just come. And there were 300 young men, and I had breakfast with them. And so, you know, an American, I'm sitting next to this wonderfully handsome Ethiopian young man. And I said to him, you know, I imagine that's the first time you ever flew in an airplane. She said to me, Rabbi, the first time I flew in an airplane is the first time I saw stairs. So you're coming from the 15th century to the 21st century in 10 minutes. So that's an accomplishment. You have, therefore, the Jews that came from Europe on one side, the Jews who came from the rest of the world on the other side, and that's part of the chom that we have in the land of Israel. So all of this was religious anti-Semitism. Now, religious anti-Semitism, it had the Inquisition in Spain. Now, the Inquisition was not against the Jews. It was against Jews who converted to Christianity but remained secret Jews. Those were the main victims of the Inquisition. The Inquisition lasted until the 1800s. The Inquisition came to America, and Mexico, and South America. And we know today that a large percentage of Spaniards have some sort of Jewish antecedents within them. Now, religious anti-Semitism can be cured. You convert. Or so it seemed. But what happened was, Charles Darwin in the 19th century comes up with this great idea of biological evolution. Now, that's not my topic here as to whether or not biological evolution is or is not the correct way to look at the development of species. But let us say that it is. There were philosophers, especially in England, who took it one step further. And they said, just like there's biological evolution, there's social evolution. The idea of the survival of the fittest is not only limited to amoeba or to lizards or to fish, it also applies to human beings. There's a man, Houston Chamberlain, that came up with all of these ideas. And it was very popular. It was extremely popular, especially in the colonial era, where the white race felt that it was superior to all other races, and that its job was, so to speak, to civilize the world. So because of that, all of a sudden, there arose a new type of anti-Semitism, not a religious anti-Semitism, because the Enlightenment had pretty much lowered the profile of religion in Europe. The Protestants had broken away from the Roman Catholic Church. But the new type of anti-Semitism was racial anti-Semitism. It was your DNA. The survival of the fittest, the Jews are not the fittest. So you have here a wonderful contradictory view of the Jews, which is still prevalent in the world today. Part of it is the Jews, they run everything. There's a committee, the protocols of the elders of Zion. The Jews run the banks, the Jews run the world. Everything is the Jews. And the other part at the same time is that the Jews are not the fittest. The Jews are not to survive because of the fact that somehow they pollute society. They're the worst. So on one hand, we're the best, and on one hand, we're the worst. And this 19th century anti-Semitism, racial anti-Semitism, is the forerunner to what happened to us in the 20th century. Because as Hitler proved, it didn't make any difference whether you were observant or not observant, whether you even were Jewish or not Jewish. If you went back 4 generations and there was Jewish antecedent, that's it, you're gone. And that's a product of racial anti-Semitism, and it can't be cured because it's within you. And therefore, the only method to cure it is to exterminate it. Now, this lethal racial anti-Semitism combines with the European tradition of religious anti-Semitism and gives us the Holocaust. First it gave us the Dreyfus trial, then it gave us the pogroms in Europe, in Eastern Europe, but then finally it comes to its final solution in the final solution itself. What was the Jewish reaction to all of this? Well, there was very little the Jews could do about it. They were scattered, defenseless. Most of them were not citizens of any country, had no rights. And therefore, somehow they just had to bend their heads and hope that somehow they would survive, as the Jewish people have survived miraculously. Enter a new idea completely, the world of Zionism. Herzl's idea was, we're going to solve anti-Semitism. His whole thrust for having a Jewish state was that we were going to survive anti-Semitism. We're going to take care of it, finally. If we are normal, if we have a flag, we'll have an anthem, we'll have an Olympic team, we'll have a country, nobody will hate us. They hate us because we're abnormal. But once we become normal, no problems. In fact, he used the example of Guatemala. He said, it will be like Guatemala. Nobody hates Guatemala except the Guatemalans, but nobody else hates it. Right? So nobody will hate us. We heard from Professor Kedar last night about the success, the unbelievable success of the State of Israel in its 65 years of existence. But Herzl's promise has never been fulfilled, because not only has the State of Israel not solved the problem of anti-Semitism, it has to a great deal exacerbated it. And not only that, it's made it legitimate. There was a period of time when anti-Semitism was not legitimate. I would say from 1945 to 1967. In 22 years, it wasn't legitimate. But since then, because the Jews made the mistake of winning the Six-Day War, and they made the mistake of winning the Yom Kippur War, and they made the mistake of establishing a strong and vital state of Israel, and because of the Jewish triumph over communism, because it's a Jewish triumph. It's not Reagan or the missiles that brought down the Soviet Union. It's Sharansky and Ida Nudel and 30 other Jews that brought them down. Because of all of that, so anti-Semitism has made a great comeback, except it dresses itself in the form of being anti-Israel. I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm just against the State of Israel. I'm against its policies, I'm in the extreme, I'm against its existence. And this anti-Semitism is unfortunately fueled by Jews, as has always been in Jewish history, that there's an element within the Jewish people that are self-haters. For some reason, they just can't deal with their Jewishness. And it comes to expression in academia, in the media, in all sorts of different methods. So in today's world, boycotts, delegitimization, here in South Africa, you had the Goldstone Report, etc., etc. All of these things are manifestations of a different type of anti-Semitism. It's not religious. It's not even racial. But it's somehow a feeling that these people don't know their place. What are they doing there? What right do they have to be there? What right do they have to be successful even? And that resentment translates itself in our world in many things that we see. So what can we do about it? Well, I think we can, in our time, have the ability to do some things about it. We should not let anti-Semitism go unanswered. We should not just take it. And we should therefore write and complain and explain. You know, Ben-Gurion said it doesn't make any difference what the Goyim do, it's only what we do. But that was wrong. It doesn't make a difference. And because for 50 years we never complained, we just thought that it would pass, so therefore it has gained momentum till our time. And it is extremely important that every Jew should feel that he or she can be a defender of the Jewish people. To explain to the world that it's not our fault, but that somehow it is because of us. And that we do have special qualities that have enhanced the world, but that our special quality is no excuse for hating us, for discriminating against us, for somehow demonizing us in a manner that is unfair and untruthful. The rabbi said, and this is my conclusion, the rabbi said that why was it called Sinai? You know, it was Sinai Indaba. That's a play on words. Sinai in Hebrew is the word Sinai. So the rabbis say, Mipnei sheyorda sino la'olam, because hatred came down also. There's hatred. The Jews rub people the wrong way, simply by their existence, simply by being what we are. And therefore, being aware of the fact that we are always vulnerable, we have to take whatever steps we can, especially in a world of communication and media as such exists today, to explain ourselves, to justify ourselves, to defend ourselves, and to make certain somehow that this plague of anti-Semitism, which has been so destructive, not just of Jews, but destructive of civilization, of the world generally, should somehow be ameliorated and lessened in our time as well. I thank you all for listening. It's been a pleasure to be here. And maybe we'll get a happier topic to talk about next time. Thank you.